Hey guys, in this video I'd like to give you a brief introduction to completing some of the eScience labs that are required for the course. What I've done is pulled up my Blackboard course here for 163, and this is one of the first labs using the eScience kit that you'll need to complete. This is my lab number 2, part 1. That corresponds to the eScience lab number 5, which is called Tissues and Skin. And so once you open this folder, you'll first of all see some of the directions here for the lab. These are my directions of the items that I'd like for you to complete. And then down below, you'll see a link to the eScience website and eScience lab directions. And so let's go over a few things and kind of orient you to some of the tools and things here. So in this particular lab, what I have is step-by-step directions. It says click on Lab 5, Tissues and Skin from the link below, and to read over the introductory information. And then I give you a lab experiment to complete, which is Experiment 1, Microscopic Slide Examination of Tissue. So let's take a look at that. I'm going to open this link. When I click on that link, it should open into a new window in my browser, and it opens up directly to this Lab 5 Tissues and Skin. Now, the first thing I say is to kind of walk through and read over the introductory information. The easiest way to navigate through that is just by clicking this next button here at the bottom. The first screen shows you your learning objectives for the lab. Then you just click next and it goes through the introductory information step by step. Usually it's very short paragraphs, some figures to kind of help you. And you just kind of read through. Sometimes they do have a little bit of animations built in, which is kind of nice. You can click on that. Usually they're very short, giving you a little description about, in this case, the tissues that you'll be looking at. And then sometimes they'll have like little quiz questions. These are optional, just to kind of see what you remember about what you just read. These are not graded. These are just some little practice things that you can take a look at. Now, for this particular lab, we're going to be looking at learning about the different types of tissues. And so that's the main area that you want to focus on. So up here in the top, I say that you can skip some of the sections here dealing directly with the skin and integumentary system, because that's going to be on the lab part 2 that we'll do for the next lesson. And so some of these over here you can kind of skip over, like layers of the skin and integumentary. But for this particular lab assignment, you want to focus in on the 4 main types of tissue: epithelial, connective, nervous, and muscle. And so you can also click over here. If you needed to go back some, you can also click these buttons over here at any time to kind of go back to an item as well. Now, when you're ready, after you kind of read the background information and you're ready to continue, down at the bottom is where your actual experiments will be. And so if you click on the Assignments and Procedures tab, and I've laid this out here, kind of outlined this for number 2, when you completed the review of the background information, you click on Assignments and Procedures at the bottom and Experiment 1. So here's the Assignments and Procedures. It opens up this little main page, and you see there's 5 experiments listed here. This is important that you only need to follow my directions that I'll list here in Blackboard, because we may not do all 5 experiments. And so we may not have time to complete every single lab experiment that eScience provides. We'll try to do many of those. We just may not have time to do all of them. And so notice also, I'll point this out, notice also they have a fetal pig introduction here. This course, we will dissect the fetal pig, but not, that's not right away. That's going to be the last dissection or last lab that we do. And so you can kind of, you can look at this now if you want to, but we'll go back and revisit the fetal pig a little later on. And so these are, so I wanted you to click on Experiment 1. Notice that also opens up a new tab, which is kind of nice, because you can just kind of, flip back and forth. You still have your lab procedures menu open, and now I've got Experiment 1 open. Experiment 1 is, for this particular lab, is asking you to study the different types of tissues. Well, because your kit doesn't include a microscope and slides, they have what they call a slide viewer. And so in the materials section, it's going to ask you to either click here or at the procedure. Either one's the same link. And that opens up a slide viewer. This is their version of a kind of a virtual type microscope. It has the different tissues listed here. So they start out with epithelial. You can minimize this if you want to see some of the different types. Here's connective tissue. You scroll down and you'll see muscle and nerve tissue. And so you can go through, you don't have to look at every single one of these tissues, but many of these you'll be tested on eventually. So here's an example of epithelial tissue, which is simple squamous epithelial. You click on this and it shows you an example of that. And it also shows you the magnification. So the only difference between these two would be the magnification. This is magnified 100 times through a microscope, and this is magnified 1,000 times through the microscope. And then you have other examples throughout. You got simple cuboidal, simple columnar, and kind of go through for epithelial. So that's kind of how to work this slide viewer. So let's back up again and see what the assignment says to do. So you go through and kind of click on the slide viewer, navigate through the images, pay attention to each of the types of tissues, main characteristics, and examples. After reviewing the examples of the main tissues, complete the Connect Tissues Lab assignment posted below. So here again, these are this particular assignment is going to include a separate lab assessment by clicking on this link here. This is going to open up your Connect assignment for this particular lab. Not all labs will have this as an option, but this particular lab, there just wasn't a lot of good questions built into the eScience lab, I thought, for this particular assignment. And so what you'll do here is click on the Tissues Lab assignment and to complete that. And it tells you here this is a 20-question assignment that's going to have animations to kind of help you understand these different types of tissues in the body. And it does count for a 15-point lab assignment. Right? And so you would just click on this to complete that assignment. Now, I do want to show you an example of a different lab. So let's maybe back up a minute. I'm going to pick a different chapter to look at. And so you may not have access to all of this right away, but eventually you will. So I'm going to go to the chapter 5 just for a moment to look at what part 2 is going to look like. So we can see a couple of other things here. This one is using the same eScience link, but it's going to be completing a different experiment in that menu. So I'm going to open up that link again. And it's the same background information, but in this time, you're going to be focused on the skin and the integumentary system. So you can skip all of the tissues and just jump to the skin information and use the next button to kind of migrate through that. Now, under the assignments and procedures, it's the same list, but for this one, we're going to be doing experiment 2 and experiment 3. The other thing I want to show you is what's called the lab workbook. Most of the time, there'll be opportunities to use this lab workbook to record your answers for a particular lab. And so this is a Word document, and so all you have to do is click on this. This will open. I'll hit OK here. It'll open a Word file. I'm going to hit Enable Editing. And this has any of the pre-lab questions and experimental questions and things like that pertaining to this particular lab. So it's important, though, to find out which questions I have assigned, because I may not have assigned every single question in this particular document. So if we go back to our original assignment list here, this is, again, Lab 2, eScience Lab Part 2. We can kind of go through and look to see, which assignments you actually need to complete. So you're going to be doing experiment number 2, looking at the slide viewer again, and then it says return to the Assignments and Procedures tab. Click on your lab workbook. It opens as a Word document. Scroll down to experiment 2, post-lab questions, and I want you to complete post-lab questions 1 through 4, and that'll count 5 points toward this particular lab assignment. Then step 4. So sorry, before I move on, let's go back and find that post-lab questions 1 through 4. And so if we go back to the Word document, we go to experiment 2. And experiment 2, and we see microscopic slide examination of skin, and we see post-lab questions here, and it says 1, 2, 3, and 4. All right, so those are your questions to complete there. All right, step number 4, return to the assignment procedures and tab and click on experiment 3, sweat gland distribution, follow the directions to complete that lab, and then you'll go to that Word document, that lab workbook, and complete table 2 and post lab questions 1 through 3, and that'll count for additional 5 points. And then to submit this assignment, so if we look at that lab workbook again, you can type your answers directly into here. So you can look at this, and you can type in your answers to your questions. And once you have your answers typed in, then you hit save, or you save it as a document to somewhere you can find it on your computer. And then you want to upload that document to Blackboard. And so to do that, what you'll need to do is click on the title here. Is going to also serve as an assignment submission link. And so once I click on that, this is where I can upload any documents that I'm asking for that particular assignment. And so you'll need to upload that Word document along, and this particular assignment requires a picture of your results. So this experiment, you're going to be doing a sweat gland distribution experiment, and I want to see what your actual graph paper results look like after you finish the experiment. And so to do that, you finish the experiment and take a picture of those, and then you need to submit all of that together. Now, you've got a couple of options here. One is you can take your Word document and actually import and insert those pictures that you've taken inside of this Word document. So everything is there together. Just make a new page inside of Word, insert pictures, and you can put your pictures that you've taken for your lab directly into the Word document. Everything's together, and you submit it as one file. Or you can, when you go to attach files, you can upload multiple files at the same time. So maybe you have some picture files along with your document file, that's fine. But a couple of things. One is make sure that you do all of this together, because you can only submit one thing at a time. You can only make one submission. So everything needs to be included in that one submission. The other thing is, if you take pictures and you upload them directly here, and if you notice that the Blackboard is struggling to finish, or if it's just kind of spinning there, it may be because your picture files are too large. So you need to find a way to decrease the resolution of your picture files, because if they're too large, Blackboard can't handle that. So that's another option. The other thing is, if for some reason you can't get it to upload, just send me your files in an email, and I can work with that as well. So that's where you're going to attach your submission if your directions ask for some type of file there. So anyway, that's a brief introduction. Hopefully that was helpful to kind of orient you to kind of where some of the lab resources are and how to use it, how to upload, and how to find that lab workbook for your assignments.